Hello, everybody. This is Applejack Eclipse, and we are here for our final week of Drag Story Hour. I'm really excited to be here with you all. I'm really grateful that I have this opportunity to share some books that I have really loved with all of you. And this week, we're going to focus some more on some nonfiction reads. We have some memoirs. I really enjoy memoirs. And also, we are going to read a book that's going to give us kind of a history lesson about the AIDS epidemic and how it's really impacted and shaped the queer community. So without further ado, our first book that we have with us is called Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. It is a book that is really geared towards young adults. It's an essay style memoir about George M. Johnson, who's a journalist and an activist. And it really follows his experience from childhood to early adulthood. And it's really more specifically targeting the Black queer experience. And I think that's really super important, especially given today's climate. So that is why I wanted to pick that as one of the books that we read. So without further ado, I'm going to be sharing my screen and we're going to read an excerpt of this book together. There we go. Introduction, Black, Queer, Here. The story of how I entered the world was a foreshadowing. When my aunt first saw my head full of beautiful jet black, curly hair crowned from my mother's womb, she ran into the hospital hallway where my family waited. Sorry, everybody. It's a girl, she yelled, to my grandmother's excitement and to my father's slight disappointment. But by the time my aunt got back to the delivery room and I had been fully born, she realized her quick assumption would soon need correcting. She ran back out to the family and said, actually it's a boy. It's a girl, no, it's a boy mix-up is funny on paper, but not so hilarious in real life, especially when the star of that story struggles with their identity. Gender is one of the biggest projections placed on two children at birth, despite families having no idea how the baby will truly turn out. In our society, a person's sex is based on their genitalia. The decision is then used to assume a person's gender as boy or girl, rather than a spectrum of identities that the child should be determining for themselves. Nowadays, we are assigning gender even before birth. We have become socially conditioned to participate in the gendering of children at the earliest possible moment, whenever a sonogram can identify its genitalia. Gender reveal parties have become a trendy way to celebrate the child's fate, steering them down a life of masculine or feminine ideals before ever meeting them. It is as if the more visible LGBTQIAP+ people become, the harder the heterosexual community attempts to apply new norms. I think the majority fear becoming the minority, and so they will do anything and everything to protect their power. I often wonder what this world would look like if people were simply told you're having a baby with a penis or a vagina or other genitalia. Look up intersex if you're confused about other. What if parents were also given instructions to nurture their baby by paying attention to what the child naturally gravitates towards and to simply feed those interests? What if parents let their child explore their own gender instead of pushing them down only one of two roads society tells us to exist? When our gender is assigned at birth, we are also assigned responsibilities to grow and maneuver through life based on simple checking off of those boxes. Male, female, Black, white, straight, gay. Kids who don't fit those boxes are often left asking themselves what the truth is. Am I a girl? Am I a boy? Am I both? Am I neither? As a child, I struggled mightily with these questions, and that struggle continued to show up in various ways throughout my life. Now, as an adult, I have a much better grasp of sexuality gender, and the way society pressures us to conform to what has been the norm. I understand how this sense of normality doesn't hold space for those of us who don't fit the aesthetic of what a boy or a girl should be, or how a man or a woman should perform. Unfortunately, we are still struggling to move the conversation past an assumed identity at birth. The LGBTQIAP+ people are not just fighting for the right to self-identify and be accepted in a society that is predominantly composed of two genders, which would be the bare minimum of acceptance. We are also fighting to survive physical acts of violence. Many of us are not even surviving that. The spectrum of our traumas can be as broad as our identities. I started writing this book with the intention that every chapter would end with solutions for all the uncomfortable or confusing life circumstances I've experienced as a gay Black child in America. I quickly learned this book would be about so much more, about the overlap of my identities and the importance of sharing how those intersections create my privilege and oppression. Many of us carry burdens from the traumas of our past, and they manifest in our adulthood. We all go through stages of accepting or struggling with our various identities, gay, straight, or non-identifying, and the race and other various factors play a role of how we navigate them. Many of us are always in a state of working through something, always in a state of becoming a more aware version of self. This book is an exploration of my two identities, Black and queer, and how I became aware of their intersections within myself and in society. How I learned that neither of those identities can be contained within a simple box, and I enter the room as both of them, despite the spaces and environments I must navigate. In the white community, I am seen as a Black man first, but that doesn't negate the queer identity that will still face discrimination. In the Black community, where I more often find myself, it is not the Black male identity that gets questioned immediately. It is the intersection with queerness that is used to reduce my Blackness and overall image of Black men. Because of this memoir, I'm sharing some of my personal memories with you. These memories are specific to my experience as a kid, teen, and young adult, but they also underline some of the universal experiences of the Black and or queer people. My struggles are that of Black men and queer men and people who exist at the intersection of both identities. That's where the manifesto part comes in. I believe that the dominant society establishes an idea of what's normal is simply to suppress differences, which means that any of us who fall outside of their normal will eventually be oppressed. In each chapter of this book, I will tell you these memories of my experiences growing up and what I think they mean in a larger context of living as a Black queer person. I grew up hearing the N-word, which is a term of endearment in my home. It's become a term of endearment in many Black families. By the time I was in middle school, I was using the word regularly with friends. It was the thing to do as a 13-year-old, that is to curse and to use the N-word. We were all doing it. It was how we greeted one another, how we clowned one another. We had different tones and inflections that would tell you the way that the word is being used, but never with the ER at the end. We knew that saying the word with the hard ER meant something different. By high school, I stopped using it. Surrounded by whiteness, I wasn't going to dare let my classmates get comfortable using that word with or around me. Anytime a white student even tried to utter it, I checked them. White kids love to test Black kids on things like that. Certain Black kids were fighting so hard to fit in, they would let kids steal that part of our culture just so they could pretend that they were accepted in white society. By college, I was in a predominantly Black school, back to using the N-word again with my new friends. It was just like middle school, except as an adult. I knew I could use it, and no one would say anything to me about it. Truth be told, most professors hated that we were using the word. They were of the opinion that the word had too much hatred in it for us to ever be able to take back full ownership in any variation. The N-word was the last word heard by many of my ancestors when they were being beaten and shackled, forced into enslavement in a new land. It was the last word heard by my people when they were lynched as a spectacle for white people. Strange fruit hanging from the popular trees, as the great Nina Simone would sing. So for many of my professors who grew up during Jim Crow experiencing legalized segregation, there is no reason to be proud of that word. It was during those years in college and right after college that the NAACP, the National Action Network, decided that it was time for the Black community to bury the N-word. There was this belief that if we stopped using it, the word itself would lose its power. They spread out arguments on both sides, people for and against this action to destroy a word so tied to the most painful parts of history in America. I began to shift to the side that thought it was best to bury it. At the time, I was learning how to be a respectable Negro with the good grades and a college degree, attempting to fit into white society, wherein I felt I deserved to be treated as an equal. It was important to me that I didn't use that word because it made us less than. I felt that our using the word was a bad thing because white people cringed when we said it, because certain Black people cringed when we said it. To me, it didn't make sense to keep using it, especially because it remained controversial. I did what I always did with most things I didn't want to deal with, buried it. I wasn't just trying to bury the N-word though. In burying the N-word, I was also burying my queerness. If I couldn't see parts of my own Blackness as respectable, there was no way I was ready to see my queerness as respectable either. But now I know that queerness is a part of Blackness, and there is no Blackness without queer people. Then in early 2012, Trayvon Martin was killed by George Zimmerman, and my entire perspective shifted on being a Black person in this society. I saw that the new age civil rights movement was being led by people who look like me, people who were fighting for me and other Black children. It was during this time that my unlearning process really began. My eyes were opened by seeing the shooting of Black people at the hands of police, seeing the killing of Black children like Tamir Rice at the hands of police. Seeing that it didn't matter whether you were an affluent Black, a poor Black, a child, or an adult in the eyes of society, I was still an N-word. And my love for my Blackness meant that I had every right to fight for my people and every right to take back ownership of that word. So I started using the N-word again. I understand now that my Blackness is self-defined, and to those that use the N-word or not use the N-word is my choice. But it shouldn't be based on comfort or those who constantly seek to invalidate me. I understand now that there is no such thing as a respectable Negro in the eyes of society, nor was I ever made to be one. Black. How long is this? Okay. So we're gonna stop here. And then he's gonna kind of go on to talk about his queer identity and his queer journey. This is still all in the introduction. So the first chapter, we're gonna go back to the time that he was 5 years old and he was already noticing things about himself. And it's really gonna take you through his entire journey. And it's such a great book. I highly recommend that you read it. Again, the title for this book is Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, and I highly recommend that you read it. The second book we're going to look at is called Brave Face. It is another memoir. I'm going to kind of warn you that this one gets kind of dark. The author is Shaun David Hutchinson. This book deals with drug use. It deals with self-harm, suicide ideations, and a suicide attempt. So it's really dark. So I do want to give that content warning. So I really want to think about you and your mental health and what you need. So this is a book where you might have to take breaks. If it's too much for you, you might want to avoid it altogether, but it is something that people deal with in our community. And so that's why I feel it's important to share it. This is a memoir of, again, Shaun David Hutchinson. This is his late teenage years, around the age of 19. He's dealing with depression and also being queer. It does have a quote, happy ending, meaning he gets help and he turns out to be like, it doesn't have like a sad, depressing ending if that is what you're worried about. He gets the help that he needs and he's kind of working through his experiences. But I do wanted to let you know, sorry everybody, that this is a bit of a heavier book. So hold on while I bring up the second book for us all. Sorry everybody, the book is loading. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen once again. Here we go. Brave. The truth. Truthfully, I was able to piece together timelines and events from old emails and journals that I managed to hold on to. I've changed the names of all schoolmates and friends, as well as many identifying details. Some of the people portrayed are composites. When I came to recruiting conversations, I'll do my best to recall the flavor of the conversation because it's not always possible to recall something from 20 years ago. Sorry, everybody, we're gonna skip this part. I thought this was actually the start. Here we go. Part 1, wrong words. Journal entry, 1997. Every day, at least once, I silently wish I wasn't gay. See, basically being gay involves choices and fears. The choice is how we go about finding love. The fear is that I never will. I feel so alone because I'm surrounded by people who can never fully understand exactly how I feel. I know that I am gay and I can't do anything about the life I have to lead, but neither can I do anything about or with the life I have. No matter what angle I try to look at things, the truth is that I'm a coward. I talk and strut, but what do I ever accomplish? I don't know. It just seems like I'm running in an endless circle. I don't want to look back on my life and regret the path I took. I look at my life presently, though, and I hate, and I hate, and I hate. Vocabulary lesson, part 1. Sorry, 8th grade, year 1991 to 1992. I knew what it meant to be a faggot, but not what it meant to be gay. I was 13 in 8th grade at St. Mark's Catholic School. Thankfully, this wasn't a building filled with nuns who beat our knuckles with rulers. Our science teacher and vice principal was a woman with short hair who'd served in the military, rode a Harley to school, and taught us about both puberty and evolution. We attended daily religion class, where I did my homework for other classes and had mass once or twice a month, but I didn't mind. Despite not being Catholic, I liked St. Mark's. It was nothing like my previous school, where I'd been frequently sent to the administrator's office for counseling with the vice principal who would beat my ass with a sandal and then pray for my eternal soul, which he made sure I knew she believed was hellbound. I hated that school so much that I faked fevers going to the bathroom and running hot water against my forehead. I also scraped a pencil eraser across the crook of my arm until it bled, and frequently jumped from the top of the metal geodesic dome on the playground in an attempt to break my ankle. My only friend was a boy who once ate a spider during a fire drill. My experience at St. Mark's was different. I learned how to cultivate friendships, how to fit in without being miserable, how to make people laugh, and I learned some new vocabulary words. In the mornings before school, I sat in front of the library, which was situated at the far end of the parking lot between the main school building and the church. Younger kids chased one another around or threw footballs, but I was an 8th grader and too cool for that. Instead, I killed time reading. After falling in love with Robin McKinley's The Blue Sword, I searched out and devoured as many fantasy novels as I could get my little hands on. My appetite was insatiable, and when I couldn't find books I hadn't read, I reread old ones. One morning near the beginning of the school year, I was lounging on the steps, my back to a column, reading The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. I didn't hear Kurt approach. I didn't know he was there until his shadow fell across me. And I didn't think anything of it until he slapped my book out of my hand so hard the cover tore off. Faggot. He stood over me with his hands on his hips, staring me down. He'd never been bothered while reading before. In fact, I was known for sneaking books behind my textbooks when I was bored. I wasn't popular, but I wasn't unpopular either. And I certainly wasn't a faggot. Albert was a faggot. Albert was a tall, thin boy with delicate features and long eyelashes, whose hair was always perfect, and whose uniform was always impeccably neat. Albert was best friends with girls and hung out with them instead of us. Tito was a faggot. Tito was my mother's hairdresser, and she sometimes took me to him to get my hair cut too. He was sometimes flamboyant. He was a flamboyant Mexican who fluttered around his shop, spoke with a lisp, and carried his hands with a characteristic limp wrist. Hollywood was a faggot. Hollywood was a character in the 1987 movie Mannequin, which tells the story of an uninspired young man on the verge of losing his job designing window displays for department stores, and the mannequin who comes to life and does the work for him. She saves his job. They fall in love. Barf. The end. Hollywood is a fellow window dresser who is played for laughs by Meshach Taylor. From his campy demeanor and dramatic gasp to his flamboyant collections of glam and glasses and to his flamboyant collection of glam sunglasses, he's nothing but a joke. I'm going to turn my brightness and see if that helps. Hollywood has no backstory, no life, and serves no purpose in the movie other than to be laughed at and to help the hero get the girl. Hollywood was every gay stereotype rolled up into one poorly written character. Hollywood was a faggot. Tito was a faggot. Albert was a faggot. And faggot was the worst insult to fling at an 8th grade boy. Fuck you, I said slowly. Slowly, I rose to my feet. Kurt was bigger than me, but I was taller. All I wanted to do was pick up my book and go back to reading about a world of magic, where a person's deeds define them. But I couldn't let Kurt's challenge pass. There was no one else from our class around, but that didn't matter. Faggot, Kurt said again, and then he walked away. I retrieved my book and the cover, which I later decided not to tape back on. It was the cover, I believed, that set Kurt off. And I made the decision to stop reading where anyone might see me, so that no one else thought I was a fag. I also decided Kurt had to learn a lesson, so I casually whispered to the right people that I'd seen Kurt being friendly with Albert. I never called Kurt a fag, but soon other kids did. Soon Kurt was the butt of jokes. Soon boys he'd been friends with conspired to throw him in the dumpster at the edge of the PE field, and Kurt never called me a faggot again. No one did. I knew nothing of sexuality, nothing of sex except that it sounded kind of gross. I knew nothing of love, nothing of being gay. To me, being gay and being a faggot were the same. They were the worst things a person could be. They were what I never wanted to become, and I'd do anything to ensure I never did. Future Self, Part 1. August, year 1992. I want to be a lawyer. My mom was scared. She was driving slowly, stuck in traffic alongside everyone else who waited until the last minute to flee the monster hurricane which targeted South Florida. Hurricane Andrew might have been the first hurricane of the season, and he might have come late, but he was not playing games. My mom had My mom had been born and raised in Florida, so she didn't scare easily when it came to hurricanes. But Andrew was projected to tear right through our neighborhood, and she finally made the call to take me and my two stepbrothers to my aunt's house, north of us. Why? My mom asked. I shrugged. To help people. Then you want to become a defense attorney? Yeah, I said, a public defender. You won't make much money that way. I guess not, but I love to argue. And you don't need a lot of math to be a lawyer. My mom laughed. It was good to see her laugh despite the fact that a force of nature, a thing over which she had no control, was threatening to tear apart the life she had built. My mom had worked for a law firm. She had fallen down a flight of steps and hurt her back so badly that she had been declared legally disabled. She had escaped a small town, skipped a bad marriage to my biological father, and she had built a life she was proud of. She was raising me and my brother Ryan. She was raising me and my brother Ryan. She had remarried and was helping to raise my stepdad's two sons. No matter what the universe threw at her, she fought to protect the life she had and the life she wanted, but no one can fight a hurricane. I was 14 when Hurricane Andrew hit, wobbling slightly to the south and sparing my hometown, but devastating Homestead. While most of my friends from St. Mark's graduated 8th grade and went to a nearby Catholic high school, I decided to jump ship and attend my local public school. I honestly don't know why. Maybe I was ready for a new adventure. Maybe I wanted to reinvent myself. Leaving the kids I'd spent 4 years with and starting over at a new school was a terrifying decision, but it also felt like the right one. I said goodbye to my friends and never saw any of them again. I was so excited to start high school, I'd signed up for classes and had gone shopping for supplies. Hurricane Andrew screwed everything up. I was maybe the only person who was actually disappointed that the first week of school had been canceled, because I'd spent all summer dreaming of how my first week would unfold. It would be like a John Hughes movie. More 16 Candles than The Breakfast Club. I wish I was Jake or Bender, but I was probably going to wind up more like the characters played by Anthony Michael Hall. Nerdy, eager, badly dressed. I was okay with that because the cool kids still accepted him in their own way. I saw my future self make friends and going to homecoming games and get drunk at parties and go to prom. I saw my future self graduate high school and head off to college, fall in love and get married, attend law school and build a career defending the vulnerable, have children grow old and die happy, surrounded by people I love. You can do it, my mom said. I believe you can do anything you set your mind to. Really? Of course. My mom always told me the truth, even when I might have preferred she didn't. So I believed her when she said I could do anything and become anyone. I believed there were no doors closed to me, no challenges I could not defeat, no obstacles I could not overcome if I worked hard, fought bravely, and moved through life with integrity. I wasn't a good student. Teachers were constantly saying that I was smart, but that I wasn't living up to my potential. I'd come to believe that my failures were a result of just being lazy. We studied the 13 original U.S. colonies in Mrs. Baker's 8th grade social studies class. Mrs. Baker had never liked me, and I definitely never liked her. She was a bully, and I hated bullies, so I took advantage of every opportunity to undermine her. I asked uncomfortable questions that I knew she wouldn't want to answer. Questions about colonists' complicity in the mass murder of Native tribes, and about how American exceptionalism was an idea founded on the backs of slaves, and play the class clown whenever possible. When Mrs. Baker announced that we'd be taking our comprehensive exam on the 13 colonies, she made sure to fire a shot at me. The exam will be on Monday, giving you all weekend to study, though I'm sure that you won't bother. The exam will be on Monday, giving you all weekend to study, though I'm sure that won't bother Mr. Hutchinson, since no amount of studying can help him. She sneered at me, and a couple of people snickered. Oh, damn, I've been called out by Mrs. Baker. I can ace the test, I said. This is a test about the 13 colonies, not about napping. Okay, I said. We'll see. The exam would require knowing everything about the original colonies, when they were founded, who founded them, their major imports and exports, their location, the country the founding colonists came from. The exam would be something of a legend at St. Mark's, known to make or break a student's grade for the semester. So of course, instead of spending the weekend studying, I set an alarm to wake me up 2 hours early on Monday morning. I sat outside on my patio and I memorized everything. I'm impressed, Mrs. Baker said when she handed back the exams. She eyed me skeptically on test day when I became the first to finish. Not only a 98, but also the highest score in the class. She paused at my desk. You must have studied a lot. I could have taken the win. I could have accepted the praise and let it go, but I didn't. I played Super Mario all weekend, I said. I didn't start studying until Monday morning. Yeah, I know I was a dick, but I also believed, like my parents and my teachers, that I could do anything I set my mind to. And when I failed, it was because I was lazy and not giving up on my potential. I believed that the future I envisioned for myself was achievable. I just had to try harder. I just had to want it badly enough. So even as Hurricane Andrew bore down on South Florida and threatened the future that my mother had worked so hard to build, my future felt perfect and possible. And this is where we're gonna stop for our second story. Super, super good, like I said. It deals with, like I said, he's gonna eventually develop some depression and kind of how he's gonna navigate that, and starting out some really unhealthy ways, but then he's gonna kind of figure himself out. He's gonna get the right help that he needs, and it's a good book, and I really encourage you to read it. And for our last story, we're going to read Viral by Ann Bausum. This is the history of the AIDS epidemic, and it literally spans from the year 1969 to now. We're going to learn about the community's experience, the front leaders. We're going to see protests up and personal. We're going to learn about ACT UP and other leading organizations, affinity groups, how the community really fought hard to take charge of their own healthcare, fighting for justice, and how they really pulled together to take care of their own. And that is really what I love so much about our community. So that is going to be our last story, and completely nonfiction. So here we go. Give me 1 second because I am going to share my screen with all of you once again. All right. The Fight Against AIDS in America, Viral by Ann Bausum. Hope I'm not butchering these names, and I really apologize if I am. Here we go. Part 1, Contagion. Part 1 is going to be talking about the years 1969 to 1983. Too much is being transmitted. We have all of these diseases going unchecked. There are so many opportunities for transmission that if something new gets loose here, we're going to have hell to pay. And that was a quote by Dr. Selma Dritz, October, year 1980. The caption for the picture reads, San Francisco Department of Public Health map showing the tangled web of mysterious infections that accompanied the arrival of what became known as HIV AIDS, March, year 1982. Chapter 1, Before. 1969 to 1979. Before 1969, lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, and the cross-dressing pioneers of the transgender movement lived in a world that sought to delegitimize their very existence. Even the term used to categorize them, homosexual, doubled as an epithet. Every religious faith condemned same-sex attraction as sinful. The medical establishment categorized it as a form of mental illness, and authorities criminalized the most intimate of private sexual acts almost uniformly across the United States, even within one's own home. Just dancing with someone of the same sex could lead to an arrest. In most places, the only night when an individual could safely assume a persona of the opposite gender was on Halloween. Such conditions push people deep into the metaphorical closet towards tragic self-destructive acts. Oppress people long enough and they may refuse to stay confined. In 1969, those shuttered closet doors burst open during a police raid on a hot June night at the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in New York City. The raid ignited days of street protests that helped to draw gay people out of isolation and push them towards an affirming sense of community. The Stonewall riots signaled a collective rejection of past condemnations, and they fueled an embrace of the possibilities of gay liberation and the quest for freedom. Freedom from oppression, freedom to embrace one's identity, and freedom to embrace one another. The various strands of what would become the LGBTQ communities explored these freedoms in unique ways. Lesbians found strength in the sisterhood of solidarity, whether as couples or as part of the women's liberation fight against culture's male-dominated power structure. The era's butch lesbian and male transvestites defied the biologically aligned cisgender norms of identity and paved the way for the transgender movement that would follow. Many gay men joined their lesbian and bisexual and trans allies in an ongoing fight for increased civil and legal rights. A good number of them also pursued trails of personal liberation that often came down to one thing: sex. Uninhibited, unrestrained sex. All those loves that dare not speak their names, all those forbidden sex acts, recalled Roger McFarlane, were free for the taking in places like New York City. He discovered after moving there from rural Alabama. Baby boomers, that abundant population that came of age during the 1960s and 70s, looked around and found plenty of people ready to explore the territory previously shrouded by taboo. For gay men, what they experienced was not just pleasurable, noted McFarlane, but it was also very liberating because it removed shame. Removed shame by the bucketfuls. It replaced shame, in fact, with great joy and self-discovery of your body and other people's and loving each other. And I mean all the good stuff about free love. Free love. The idea that it was okay to enjoy sex with or without emotional bonding, and that someone could love multiple partners simultaneously. Free love. It was heady, it was liberating, and it was fun. It was also big business. An urban infrastructure blossomed after Stonewall that supported and made from men having sex with men. During the previous decades, the gay community had taken roots in coastal cities such as New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, and neighborhood networks of the underground gay clubs and bars. During the late 1960s and 1970s, as laws became less restrictive, these businesses came out of hiding, and they multiplied, diversified, and thrived. There were bars that catered to particular fetishes and attires, clubs that where dancing prevailed, places with darkened back rooms, and always everywhere the temptation to hook up for sex. Gay men cruised weightlifting gyms. They visited informal meetup spots such as the abandoned piers and warehouses of Lower Manhattan in New York City. Even during an era where gay people generally remained closeted among coworkers and family, the network existed for finding like-minded friendship and more. One of the most enticing places to mingle was in gay bathhouses. Although these establishments had a veneer of respectability about them, offering swimming pools and exercise equipment, steam rooms, showers, a staff of masseurs, live entertainment, and other amenities, the underlying purpose of a bathhouse was unmistakable. Come to man's country, a New York destination advertised, and develop your body or a friendship with someone else's. Visit us once and you'll come back again and again. Someone looking for sex could lounge in a private changing room, door ajar, and wait for a stranger to walk in. It was simple, recalled writer Larry Kramer. It was like going to a candy store. As the 70s built towards a hedonistic crescendo disco, music took hold, and its irresistible, unrelenting beat pulled bodies into such a legendary dance club such as Studio 54 in the center of New York City, or the gay-oriented Saint in the lower Manhattan. Illegal drug use was on the rise everywhere, from the straight world to the gay party scene, where it became an essential part of the entertainment. Marijuana, cocaine, LSD, Quaaludes, speed, Special K, also known as ketamine, and mescaline were in abundance. So was inhaled amyl nitrate and a tactical enhancing substance that went by the street name of poppers because of the sound it made by opening its packaging. More drugs led to inevitably more sex, and more sex led to more experimentation. But even in places like New York City and San Francisco, public displays of same-sex affection drew everything from sidelong glances to violent attacks beyond all but the most tolerant settings. People of color who are gay faced double doses of discrimination and risk. Laws overwhelmingly sided with employers who fired gay employees, landlords who evicted gay tenants, and businesses that excluded gay customers, all of which happened with disheartening regularity. The caption for this photo is, New York City activists march in the first gay pride parade to commemorate the previous year's Stonewall riots. June 28th, year 1970. Participants included Vito Russo, holding the banner, wearing striped pants. In consequence, long before the emergence of the term safe space, gay-dominated retreats sprang up as locations for those who could afford them, including Fire Island, a 30-mile-long barrier off the coast of Long Island, beyond New York City. The subterranean revelry of nearby Manhattan burst into full bloom under the sunshine through the endless nights of the summer weekends. Private house parties, beach romances, group orgies, the possibilities were only limited by the weather and the ferry schedule. Fire Island was not the only point of refuge. Unfettered by family responsibilities, gay men of means made the runs to other hotspots of what they called the National Gay Circuit. Key West, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami, Florida's South Beach in Florida, Providence and Rhode Island, California's Castro District in San Francisco, West Hollywood near Los Angeles, and the state's southern desert getaway of Palm Springs. Each have developed reputations for its own distinctive features, attractions, and not to be missed seasonal parties. Whether catching the circuit tour or marching in a gay pride parade or visiting the darkened back rooms of bars, gay men could experience a shared sense of camaraderie, of belonging, and of affirmation that their desires were perfectly okay. Recalling the dancing on Fire Island, Kramer told the documentary filmmaker Joseph Lovett, "It was hard not to feel great love and trust and brotherhood. And look at us. Look, we've made it. The rest of society would have to catch up with the times." For those most deeply embedded in such environments, unfettered same-sex intercourse became the ultimate statement of liberation. One way to reject past oppression was to ignore all previous boundaries on sexual behavior. For some, the physical act of sexual intercourse broke free from any mooring to deeper emotional attachment. If having some sex equaled liberation, then having more sex surely demonstrated still greater freedom. Even couples in long-term relationships reevaluated mutual commitments of monogamy. Norms of behavior changed so thoroughly in terms of intercourse frequency, having sex with strangers, the range of imaginable sex acts, and the use of inhibition-lowering drugs that by the end of the 70s, the most sexually active had engaged in multiple forms of intercourse with dozens or hundreds, or in some cases, even thousands of partners. Such actions were not without consequence. Sexually transmitted infections raced through local communities and jumped via the gay circuit from point to coast to coast. A surge in oral anal intercourse merely compounded the problem, transforming parasitic intestinal tract illnesses previously associated with poor sanitation to sexually acquired diseases. At the epicenters of infection, people traded illnesses as often as they swapped phone numbers. Gonorrhea, herpes, hepatitis, syphilis, amoebiasis, giardiasis, a veritable carousel of diseases. So much disease that it was too much, as Selma Drees would tell her medical colleagues in San Francisco in 1980. Condoms played almost no role in containing any of this transmission because at the time, people saw condoms as having only one function, preventing pregnancy. Anyone who became ill simply turned to healthcare professionals for what was then an expanding arsenal of powerful antibiotics. These drugs seemed capable of curing everything, and they became almost an essential vitamin. They became almost an essential vitamin for the most active participants in the gay male sexual revolution. We didn't know that we were dancing on the edge of our graves. New York transplant Roger McFarlane later observed, "It was the hideous experience that I ever experienced in my life." And it unraveled still, and it is still unrivaled still. Like before Stonewall had been filled with oppression, and life after Stonewall for gay men overflowed with liberation. But that was before what came next. And what came next was AIDS. So we're gonna stop there. So really what we just kind of read was kind of the leading up to events, but it really gets down into the good, the bad, the ugly, and then where we are today. They spent a lot of time talking about a lot of different events, and it's kind of like a hard book to read. I found it to be super interesting, and I really learned a lot that I didn't really know before. So again, the name of that book is Viral, and the author for that is Ann Bausum. And I'm going to make sure to have all of these books for you. I really, again, want to just thank you for letting me do these story hours with you every Friday. I've had so much fun doing it. Please, if you ever need like a book suggestion, I have so many more than what we looked at today, and these past 4 weeks in general. Yeah, this was really a lot of fun. Thanks for having me, everybody, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.